A new type of science communicator has recently arisen, one that preys on and misleads scientifically curious audiences. We will identify and expose these influencers and their manipulative and corrosive rhetoric. These communicators are a product of the toxic waste of contemporary politics and broken online incentives leaking into science, and they are aligned, intentionally or unintentionally, with political projects that seek to undermine science. They are the science populists. Populism, broadly defined, is a political strategy that strives to appeal to ordinary people who feel that their concerns and points of view are being disregarded by established institutions, politicians, and power brokers. It frames politics as a struggle between the people and a corrupt elite, often presenting representative democracy and democratic institutions as subversions of the will of the people. Key elements include the creation of a divisive us versus them dynamic, and the presence of a charismatic leader who claims to represent the popular will. Populists are highly prone to conspiratorial ideation, as their worldview centres around the alleged deliberate undermining of society by nefarious forces. Any source of information that contradicts the populist narrative is immediately designated as propaganda from the corrupt elite. Fake news, alternative facts, following the science. It's clear that populist political rhetoric is having a powerful impact with the public in the UK, the US, and many other nations around the world. However, if you're a science enthusiast, you may have noticed a curious new phenomenon when consuming science content. Populism has arrived in science communication. A thriving market for populism-laced science communication has recently developed, and several high-profile communicators have been only too happy to meet the public demand. This new wave of communicators are marked out by their proclivities for suggesting that science, scientific institutions, and even society itself are in crisis.
I just want them to think about what I'm saying, because the future of physics depends on it, and the future of science depends on the future of physics, and the future of our civilizations depends on the future of science. Science is failing. It's failing right in front of our eyes, and no one's doing anything about it.
Maligning hardworking scientists by ascribing them corrupt intentions.
You and a small cadre of people are like intellectual border collies of the physical sciences, casting shade and aspersions on those who are succeeding where the quantum gravity, string theoretic, and M theoretic programs are failing.
Misleading the public about the evidentiary basis for fringe ideas.
I haven't seen a theory like this come from any single individual ever. Not one that's this fleshed out or has this amount of unexampled connections within itself.
Laying the groundwork for scientific funding to be cancelled or reallocated as they see fit.
Yes, academia is a planned economy. We're financing it the same way that the communists finance their production chains, with centralized decision-making, committees and 5-year plans. It worked badly for the communists, and it works badly for research.
And selling to audiences the sense that they are privy to hidden knowledge. Hidden knowledge which experts dismiss, fear, or do not even understand.
But why is it not working? I'll try to illustrate this with a simple sketch. If you understand the following 2 minutes, you can outsmart most particle physicists, and you don't want to miss that opportunity, do you?
Previous generations of science communicators fell roughly into one of two categories. 1. Scientific domain experts with a talent for communicating scientific information. Think Brian Cox, Katie Mack, or Simon Singh. Qualified and active scientists with a passion for sharing the wonders of their fields and educating public audiences. Or 2. Semi-lay people with a deep admiration for science who share the wonderful experience of learning about how the world works with their audiences. People who could lead audiences on the same journey of discovery that they had undertaken. Think Hank Green, Rebecca Watson, or Bill Nye the Science Guy. They often have an education in a specific area of science, but aim to share their passion for all of science by working with a team to accrue information and effectively summarize expertise. The communication of both these groups is defined by enthusiasm, wonder, beauty, progress, and education. Both of these groups are happy to point out problems in science, but they want people to understand and value science and potentially become part of the scientific community, and audiences flock to them for this style of content. However, recently, a third category of science communicators has emerged. In contrast to previous science communicators, these influencers are marked by their cynicism and the fact that they spend a significant fraction of their online airtime spreading mistrust of science and scientists, suggesting that the scientific enterprise is under-delivering for the public, undermining the scientific consensus while championing popular contrarian viewpoints, and laying the groundwork for a complete overhaul of the scientific funding landscape in line with their personal prescriptions. These communicators are the science populists, and audiences flock to them for their cynical takes. The market for science populist content is booming. Large, non-populist science communicators such as Angela Collier have recently remarked that a significant fraction of their audience have even exerted pressure on them to produce science populist content.
If people are gonna watch my videos and lump me in with these grifters anyway, like, why don't I just take the easy route? Why don't I just start publishing like weekly boring ass science news videos where I'm like, look at this paper, so dumb, science is broken. Like, is that what you want to watch? Like, because that'd be way easier than the videos I make now.
Dr. Collier raises the important question of why these individuals are becoming such influential figures in online science spaces. Why is such cynical rhetoric becoming so popular amongst people who see themselves as science enthusiasts? This video will discuss the societal sentiments from which these science populists arrive and their symbiotic relationship with political populism. One hand washes the other.
Can you talk about the inextricable linking between science progress and Western and in general human civilization, and what threat they may still be under to this very day?
Well, it's very interesting. You know far more about this than me, but my observation has been that for some years the cathedral of knowledge in a number of subjects started to decay.
The archetypal example of the science populist is the German theoretical physicist and YouTuber Sabine Hossenfelder. However, other science communicators who share a lot of the same idiosyncrasies include powerful and popular communicators such as Eric Weinstein, Brian Keating, Kurt Jaimungal, and many more. These characters are some of the most influential figures within this new ecosystem. However, many smaller accounts are treading the same path and leading hard into similar rhetoric. The phenomenon is spreading. As mentioned previously, populists share many characteristics with traditional conspiracy theorists and cranks. As such, not all of the problematic science communicators mentioned above display every signifier of science populism. They reside on a spectrum between the typical crank and the science populists. Cranks champion specific fringe ideas that they claim should be recognised by the scientific mainstream. This distinguishes them from science populists, who dedicate a huge amount of their time to undermining the legitimacy of the scientific establishment at large, not in service of a specific idea, but as a holistic political project. All of these influencers are bound together by their propensity to lean into the same distrust of experts and institutions that powers populist political movements around the world. Understanding this connection between them is vital to parsing their rhetoric and realizing how they naturally align with political movements that damage the science they purport to champion and claim is so quintessential to human progress and flourishing.
It's different than even the COVID vaccine, so-called vaccine. I don't really call it a vaccine because it didn't really seem to do what a vaccine typically does with dead viruses and so forth. But anyway, let's call it a vaccine.
The fans of science populists regularly claim that these figures are providing an invaluable service. Criticism and debate are the lifeblood of science, and scientific fields cannot afford to become complacent when attempting to unravel the mysteries of our universe. And these communicators, fans claim, are simply pointing out legitimate problems in science, issues which mainstream scientists are scared to address or even admit. Fans believe that science populists are simply demanding appropriate accountability and action.
I know why particle physicists hate me, but what was I supposed to do? Look away and just let them deceive the public? Someone had to do it.
In short, the popularity of science populists is seen as a sign that they uniquely must be putting their finger directly on the ills of modern science. Of course, we wholeheartedly agree that consensus views and standard practices in science must be exposed to and able to stand up against dissenting points of view, and that it is vital that such points of view are platformed, heard, and carefully considered. Alternative viewpoints often stoke debate, innovation, and progress. Science populists frequently discuss important issues in science, and physics more specifically, that deserve scrutiny and discussion. After all, science populism, just like political populism, highlights and exploits real issues. Moreover, many of the contentions science populists raise are reasonable. It's not controversial to claim that career uncertainty in science causes scientists to overinvest in projects seen as safe bets, and can lead to more speculative work being sidelined.
This is open territory. Just get into it. And they say, no, they're scared. They're scared. They might not get a job.
Particle colliders undeniably require a huge level of public monetary investment. As such, they have to be carefully scrutinized and justified. This is why colliders are painstakingly discussed during huge international community engagement exercises, such as the European Strategy for Particle Physics in Europe and the Particle Physics Project Prioritization Panel, P5, in the US, and must have clear and no loose physics targets. This is also the reason that these experiments are subjected to rigorous cost-benefit analysis and return on investment calculations. It's also perfectly reasonable to point out that the system and culture of scientific publication suffers from important flaws, ranging from peer review potentially reinforcing the status quo, journals over-prioritizing sensational results and under-reporting negative results, to an undue pressure to publish.
The second question after your name is, how many citations do you have? It requires you to collaborate with people so you can put out material quickly.
Correct. However, these and many more important issues in science are openly and continuously discussed in academic fora, with many working towards creating solutions and alternatives. Science populists lie to their audiences about how these issues are not being discussed in academia, and instead present themselves as the only ones willing and able to discuss them.
If you were wondering why there are so few physicists who draw attention to the problems with their own discipline, this illustrates the problem. Physicists are not exactly welcoming of criticism.
Part of what's going on is that Sean is part of a group of physics influencers who are constantly spreading misinformation, which leads to a climate of fear.
After the noise died down, I sat down with Eric for a conversation about all of this. His theory of geometric unity. What does it all mean? And why do so many people misunderstand or misrepresent what it's all about?
This is very similar to the tactics populist politicians use to bypass the institutions of representative democracy and create political pressure by going direct to the lay public, whom they can deceive with half-truths and loaded narratives. As such, the service that science populists claim to provide is not only largely redundant, but premised on a lie from the very outset. The real problem is that science populists hijack important scientific issues to craft their narratives. They regularly mislead people about the nature and severity of problems in science by presenting their own one-sided view of an issue and obfuscating or downplaying countervailing evidence. They then use these flawed representations to craft baseless and conspiratorial narratives about science and scientists, while falsely claiming to be the only people drawing attention to problems in science. They then proceed to use these narratives as justifications for openly demanding, or at the very least laying the groundwork for, radical funding reforms and policy interventions that would be incredibly counterproductive in remedying the problems they initially highlighted and would severely exacerbate their causes. Science populists regularly build their narratives around half-truths or even total lies, and refuse to seriously engage with the views they oppose. Here are some specific examples. Sabine Hossenfelder falsely claims that scientists are looking to build new particle colliders for the purposes of looking for ghost particles and testing incredibly specific individual hypotheses dreamt up in the minds of theorists.
This is why progress has stopped. For almost 50 years, they built new experiments because they wanted to test some shiny new theories. Ideas like grand unified theories that predicted proton decay, supersymmetry that predicted all sorts of new particles, extra dimensions that predicted black holes at the Large Hadron Collider, and many other things.
However, she will singularly fail to engage with or massively downplay the central and motivating use case for the next generation of these machines: high-precision studies of the most important standard model particle, the Higgs boson.
I mean, who can resist a slogan that says, "The most expensive way to get a slightly better measurement of a particle discovered in 2012.
Dr. Hossenfelder will misrepresent her own personal beliefs that new colliders are too expensive and that scientists are engaged in make-work schemes to defraud the public, as if they are objective facts or a clear public opinion. However, she will dismiss technological advancements produced by funding large-scale experiments as incidental, refuse to engage with the concrete return on investment calculations for such experiments, and fail to highlight countervailing research which indicates that citizens around the world are happy to contribute towards such machines.
You stated, very confidently that you think such a collider would pay back the investment. Well, I don't think so.
Eric Weinstein will complain that scientists have not honestly engaged with his geometric unity framework.
What you are doing is creating an environment of fear where every university worries, what does it mean to talk to this person?
However, he will completely fail to engage with expert feedback, highlighting just how mathematically broken these ideas are for years, while continuing to claim that scientists who provide such feedback are liars and frauds.
Before you go, Eric, I was actually wondering specifically when we'll hear like a debate with you and Theo and Timothy about G.
Sorry, who's Theo?
Do you know who Timothy Wynn is?
Let's talk about Theo Polya. Who's Theo Polya?
He's the co-author from the paper.
Who is he?
Timothy Wynn.
Yeah, who is he? I don't know.
That wasn't the question, though,
No,
right?
that is the question. I'm fucking sick of these two people.
Meanwhile, figures like Brian Keating and Kurt Jaimungal will uncritically and reflexively amplify the narratives of the figures we have just mentioned.
Let's say that his models are correct. Why doesn't he publish that in peer-reviewed journals?
There's no Eric's mind works in multiple dimensions in ways that normal people can't really contemplate. So, for example, when we talk about peer review, he is already like 5 steps down the road. But the bottom line is he does not hold by peer review.
Giving an audience half a story is entirely inappropriate for any science communicator or educator, and is an abject failure of science communication. Being a science communicator with an audience in the hundreds of thousands or even millions comes with responsibility. A science communicator's job is to accurately inform and educate their audience about the current state of science. There is no way to do this without honestly engaging with consensus viewpoints and explaining what they are and why. You are, of course, perfectly welcome to disagree with consensus views and voice your disagreement vociferously. However, if you fail to accurately explain the grounding behind the views you are attacking, you are not performing science communication. You are peddling your own opinions under the guise of scientific fact. However, for science populists, educating the audience is not the priority.
Why the fuck is it my fault that cranks think I'm their best friend?
This editorial policy puts science populists and their audiences in an incredibly awkward position. If consensus scientific positions are not supported by good reasons, then the unavoidable conclusion science populists must draw is that these positions hold sway in science because of the corruption of scientists. Science populists commit themselves to engaging in conspiratorial ideation. Instead of discussing consensus viewpoints in good faith, they accuse scientists of schemes, scams, and gatekeeping.
Now, recently, many of you have seen that Mark Andreessen had a meeting at the White House. And at that meeting, something fantastic was revealed. The Biden White House told him that they had stagnated deliberately fields of theoretical physics. They took a couple of theories, they cocooned them, string theory being preeminent among them, And they said all competitor theories will die, and in the field of physics, it's called the only game in town. You try to do something else, your career comes to an abrupt end.
These claims are entirely baseless and self-serving. These narratives and accusations lead science populists to openly suggest, or at the very least set the scene for, terrible policies, which would exacerbate the causes of the problems that are the very foundation of the narratives they sell. These policies include: remove all public funding for entire fields of science, despite the fact that a lack of funding and job security is a key driver behind many of the most serious problems troubling science.
But for most of research that's currently financed by taxes, there's no good reason to do it that way.
Platform, highlight, launder and empower figures with a history of making false claims, despite claiming to want to restore public faith in science and to take spurious claims to task.
How about remote viewing? Do you still engage in remote viewing?
I will just simply say yes, and I don't want to expound upon that.
Unilaterally restructure science according to their own personal specifications, even when these specifications have no track record of stoking scientific progress.
Peer review is a cancer from outer space.
These policies would have disastrous consequences for science. At this point, it is fascinating to consider how the messaging and policy prescriptions of science populists fits into the current wider political environment. These figures feed on the toxicity of contemporary politics and broken online incentives that leak into science. They are a natural extension of the distrust of experts pushed by populist politicians to undermine the faith of the public in institutions. Like populist politicians, the science populists provide simple answers in complex subjects. They free people to believe in experts whenever they want to and reject them whenever they feel like it. And they make audiences feel knowledgeable and empowered to trust their own intuition above experts. The exact opposite of what science communication should seek to achieve. Political populists leverage culture war issues and disparage experts to achieve their political goals. Science populists leverage their positions as opponents of the scientific establishment to weigh in on culture war issues and ally themselves with fellow detractors of science. Science populists degrade public trust in science and hence are, intentionally or not, part of a political project which works to undermine science as an institution and only serves political movements that come into conflict with science. In this series, we will explore the rise and output of several science populists. We hope to make scientifically curious individuals more aware of the corrosive rhetoric and behaviour of these individuals, and invite audiences to place their trust in far more nuanced and responsible science communicators. The deliberate obfuscation of science populists takes advantage of the science-curious public. The output of the science populist wears the garb of science communication, but leaves inquisitive audiences shortchanged and misinformed regarding fascinating and nuanced scientific discussions. Science populists show a lack of respect for their audiences, activating them against science, while claiming to educate and empower them. Audiences deserve better. We will start with the German theoretical physicist Sabine Hossenfelder, a communicator who continues to demonstrate that she holds out very little hope for modern science if it fails to follow her personal prescriptions. Join us next time when we will explore her output and how it regularly represents an abject failure of science communication. I want to know what you think, because you're the scholars of enlightenment that I do this for. So please take a moment, if you wish, to let me know down in the comment section. And if you like this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, setting up notifications, and sharing this video more widely. I can't tell you how much these simple actions help me out and how much I'd appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being scientific. Thanks for being bad.